The opinions expressed on the following program are strictly those of the guests and do not necessarily reflect the views of WCZT, Regional Media, Coastal Broadcasting, personnel, or advertisers. Money Talk with Melanie, brought to you by MrCreditRepair.biz.
Money Talk with Melanie on 98.7 The Coast.
Welcome back to another live edition of Money Talk with Melanie. I'm your host, Melanie Collette, broadcasting live from beautiful Wildwood in Cape May County, New Jersey. Money Talk with Melanie is indeed the place to be tonight for a lively discussion on making big career moves during these trying times. My first hour guest is Tiana Sanchez, and she'll tell us how to make a successful entrepreneurial transition following a corporate layoff. And in the second hour, Nina Szewczak, I'm sure I said that wrong. Szewczak, there you go, has answers if your life's calling you. What would it have in store? You're going to join them both tonight on Money Talk with Melanie. I'm very excited to be here. So I'm sure that all of you who are paying close attention heard President Biden's State of the Union address last night, the top 5 moments. I was fortunately spared because I had a meeting to go to, and even after the meeting, a 7 o'clock meeting, dinner and a nightcap, I still had to be tortured with the last 15 minutes of what is laughingly referred to as a State of the Union speech. You're supposed to be super positive, right? And not shady. I just feel like the last few election cycles, the presidents have just been filled with kind of like sarcasm. And I noticed that, there was a lot of response during the speech last night. I did catch some recaps. Like I said, I caught the last 15 minutes, and I caught some recaps and some clips and things like that, because normally I'm very interested in those things, but usually I find it gives me a headache and I just want to throw stuff at my TV. So here are some recaps from last night's State of the Union speech. Now, I tuned in just in time to hear President Biden say that the State of the Union is strong. Sigh. I mean, what part is strong? The part where we absolutely let China spy on us for a week? The part where inflation is at a 40-year high? Or is it the part where we have a completely open border? I'm trying to figure out what part. What part of America is super strong. And we have a president and a vice president that are just not, I don't know how to put it kindly or diplomatically, but they don't seem to be the best and the brightest. And if they are not using their best and brightest God-given tools to run the country. It just doesn't seem like. So one of the kind of things that were pointed out, or top 5 moments of the State of the Union speech, was when some Republicans want Medicare and Social Security to sunset. That is an absolute lie. That is completely false. It's been said, Kevin McCarthy, who is now the Speaker of the House, has said repeatedly that Medicare and Social Security are not on the table in relation to the negotiations about the debt ceiling. Now, a bit of an FYI about what the debt ceiling is, if you're not familiar with the debt ceiling. So it would be like if you got a credit card and you were almost at the max on your credit card. Say you had a $5,000 limit, and you are now at $4,975. And instead of saying, wow, maybe my spending is a bit too much, perhaps I should cut back. I should cut down some of this debt before I charge anything else on this credit card. Instead of saying that, what the government does when they reach that kind of debt is say, oh, we need to raise our own credit limit. Now, anybody who's ever had a loan or had any kind of credit card knows why that could be problematic. And I've mentioned this before, but even more problematic than what we owe is who we owe. One of those places being China, which is not a friendly. They're not just a competitor, they're an adversary. So it's just very, very important to remember that. And that's why they're trying to negotiate the debt ceiling. But the Republican position has never been that Republicans want to sunset Medicare and Social Security. It's not a thing. Apparently, the fiery Marjorie Taylor Greene shouted liar when President Biden said that. And then he, of course, tried to self-correct and say, I'm not talking about the majority of you. I'm just talking about like some of you. But it's being proposed by individuals. So that's how it works, President Biden. Individuals in the Republican Party have that proposal. So let's just say on national television to the entire country that that's the Republican position. Look, it doesn't make any sense, but it's typical. McCarthy, Speaker McCarthy, shushed hecklers of his own party when they interrupted a tribute to a fentanyl victim. And quite frankly, that's the right thing to do, in my opinion. I think that if you want better behavior, you have to model it. In my opinion, Nancy Pelosi, when she was Speaker of the House and had to sit behind President Trump, behaved badly a lot of times. Just was outright rude, ripping up the speech on TV. That's not the kind of decorum that you should have as a Speaker of the House. So, in my opinion, good on McCarthy for doing that. Biden repeatedly said that his administration has created 12 million new jobs. Like, that's just not true. It's just simply not true. Since he took office in 2021, you cannot create you can't create jobs when you laid so many people off due to the pandemic. When people are not participating in the labor market as well at all or minimally. A lot of the jobs were lost during the pandemic. So when those people get rehired, that is not him creating jobs. If you do the math, Biden actually has only created 2.7 million jobs. And this is just not just me talking. These are what the fact checkers have been saying all day long. Another thing, another high point or low point, depending on how you look at it, is that, President Biden said we should ban assault weapons now. We need to ban them now, once and for all. And he continues to make this declaration saying that, talking about a gunman who allegedly used a handgun to kill 11 people while celebrating the Lunar New Year. It says the gun was reportedly a semi-automatic pistol with a magazine larger than 10 rounds. And a lot of times when these people talk about banning guns, quite honestly, they don't know what they're talking about. They don't know that, for example, AR rifle does not stand for automatic rifle. Like just things like that. And they just say these things to play on the emotions of people. And it's a terrible, terrible, terrible thing. And then finally, a fifth highlight was what is lovingly referred to as the kiss, when First Lady Jill Biden and Second Gentleman Doug Emhoff shared a kiss ahead of Biden's speech. Ooh. So those are your highlights from the President Biden's State of the Union. And I can't say that I'm sorry I missed it. Just saying. You're listening to Money Talk with Melanie. When we come back, we'll have our first guest, Tiana Sanchez.
Money Talk with Melanie, brought to you by MrCreditRepair.biz.
This is important because it's your money. Your money. Money Talk with Melanie. Money Talk with Melanie. On 98.7 The Coast.
Unemployed or underemployed? Have no fear, the TaxMama is here. Fuel your best career move with TaxMama. TaxMama can help you become an IRS enrolled agent with our next live 6-month course beginning in May 2023. Or you can start now with on-demand courses. It's your career on your schedule. Job opportunities are plentiful. TaxMama offers unlimited access to her tax mentoring portal with all the testing materials you need to overcome any test anxiety. Get your 3-year tax education in 6 months and become an IRS enrolled agent through the TaxMama. Visit irsexams.school. That's irsexams.school now to get your best career started today. Money Talk with Melanie, brought to you by MrCreditRepair.biz.
Money Talk with Melanie features lively discussions of a wide range of global, domestic, and kitchen table financial topics. Money Talk with Melanie on 98.7 The Coast.
Welcome back to Money Talk with Melanie, where my first hour guest is Tiana Sanchez, a CEO and founder of TSI LLC, a #1 best-selling author, executive coach, keynote speaker, and host of Like a Real Boss podcast. Tiana got her career start at 16 with the 90% female-led national franchise organization Hot Dog on a Stick. Became manager at 17, was promoted to regional manager, and welcomed the company as her first consulting client. Tiana's public and private sector corporate training client lists include Sony Pictures, BMW, Mercedes-Benz, and California State University, Long Beach. She's also the author of 2 books, Undefeatable and Effed Up: The Upside of Failure. Love that title. That's pretty funny. And without further ado, I'd like to welcome to the show Tiana Sanchez.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
I'm so glad to have you here. I fell out laughing when I was reading your bio earlier and saw the title of that book. Listen, sometimes that's messed up just doesn't get it done. You know what I mean?
It doesn't. No, you need emphasis.
Exactly. But there are upsides to failure. I have to say, there's definitely been times in my life when I'm kind of glad that things didn't work out.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, so I'm excited that you are here and talking about, coming out on the positive side of entrepreneurship. When it comes to layoffs, especially since there's been so many layoffs, particularly in the tech industry is experiencing a ton of layoffs. I mean, I think they probably were overhiring in the first place or had to hire a lot of people because of COVID, but that's just a personal, kind of just like a personal opinion on that. But we need someone like you with your expertise to tell us what to do when something like this happens. Before we dig in, is there anything that I didn't relate to the audience about your bio that you'd like to share?
Well, one of the things that led me to where I am today is that I was on the heels of a layoff. So starting my business was a result of the last recession we had from the financial crisis, and that really led me to becoming an entrepreneur and now having been in business for the last 12 years. So I certainly can understand where people have now found themselves in this kind of limbo of, do I go back? Do I do something different? What do I do? So, but otherwise, the bio was great. But that would be a really key element that I want your listeners to know that I've been in their shoes.
Exactly. And it is much better to hear from someone who's been there, done that, right? Than someone who it's kind of based on a theory.
Right.
So go ahead.
For sure. No. I was just going to say my experience of having gone through that led me to really figuring things out for myself, having to remarket myself, having to dig deep and realize what I've heard being called my talent stack is. What are those things that I'm really, really great at, and positioning myself for better opportunities. And so if given the opportunity today, hopefully we'll dig into that. But I will definitely take your lead wherever you want to go today. But I'm going to help your listeners.
Oh, I'm sure that you are. In fact, I'm thinking of a person right now that your information is going to help. And if I can swing multitasking, I may text her and make sure she's make sure that she is listening. But she can always listen to it as a podcast later. But no, you're very right. So talking about the number of layoffs there are now. And one of the things that you pointed out in your background information is that when people get laid off, it's a very scary time. It's happened to me too. And you need to hear things that are inspiring. You need to hear how someone else did it at a time when there's a lot of uncertainty. So how did you make that happen, make that transition when you had the career challenge and also just the challenges of everyday life being a wife and a mom?
Absolutely. That definitely was something, because I had never been laid off before, Melanie. I had always worked since the age of 16, as you described, and this was the first time that I was ever in this position. And you may have listeners that I have been working since X amount years old, and I have never been faced on the other side of a layoff or a termination or what have you. And so for me, at the time in my career, I was approaching a place in my career where I was starting to question some things anyway. I was starting to decide if this was really something I wanted to do for the long term, kind of my passion, my purpose around it. But I was still there. I was always a great worker, always producing. And so, it was a great thing. But I started kind of flirting with the idea of possibly something different. And I feel for me, it was really a divine intervention when this layoff happened. And so there was, we said the upside of failure. For me, this was an upside of a layoff, because how many of us out there are overworked, are burnout, are struggling with our mental health, are feeling guilty because we may not be spending enough time with our family and our kids. Now, I'm not saying that you go out and quit and leave your job, but if that's what you do, great. But for me, it was like a telltale sign that something needed to change. And so there was this divine intervention moment that happened. And here I was, called into the office, sitting in front of my bosses and on the receiving end of, we're letting you go. And when I went home that night, Melanie, I literally, when I tell you I had the best sleep I had had in months, it was like this huge weight had been lifted off my shoulders for a period of time anyway. And then from that point on, I had this new energy to say, okay, well, now I'm in charge of what I want to do next and kind of figuring that out. So one of the first things that I did was do exactly what I shared, which was really identify what my talent stack was. What is the thing that I have been really good at my entire career? What did I do? So I literally got a pen paper down, started listing out those things that I did really, really well. And then started to figure out, okay, what are the things that can help me achieve to get to where I want to get in this kind of next season or next career? Do I want to work for somebody else, or do I want to start my own business? And I kind of flirted again with both of those ideas, and I landed on the latter and said, okay, well, I think I want to start my own business. Mind you, had no degree, no formal training or education at that time.
Listen,
but I said, hey,
that does not. I'm a big academic with a couple letters behind her name, but I will be the first one to tell you that is not the end all to be all as far as success is concerned. People should not be concerned because you don't have letters behind your name, because you don't have a college degree, that you cannot be a successful entrepreneur. It's buffoonery. I reject that, and that's as a woman who was in education for 24 years.
I will second that motion. I'm glad that you said it. Someone that is highly degreed, because it doesn't mean that you're counted out of the conversation. That means you have to tap into those areas that you really excel in. And here's the thing. I do have an education. What I chose to do, again, not formal degrees, but what I chose to do was invest in myself to take more accelerated courses. So I would find these kind of short, maybe 6-week, weekend, different things of an area that I didn't excel in that I could take a course in and learn a little bit. I subscribed to so many newsletters and so many different magazines and things, and I went to so many webinars and in-person events and all of that so that I could just absorb what I didn't know, because I had started a business and I had never, no one in my family had owned a business in my immediate family that were still alive. So that is where I started. And was it scary? Yes. Did I question, second guess my decision? Absolutely. But what comes with it is the freedom that you are making your own decisions. What comes with it is the freedom of you having control over your next steps in your life. And so that was a big thing. But I had to reinvent myself. I had to rebrand myself because people knew me, former Tiana, which I was in banking, Melanie. And so I had to say, okay, well, now I'm doing something different. So whether you decide to stay in your same career after you do your assessment on your talents and you decide, okay, hey, am I going to work for someone else or go about this thing on my own? You definitely want to make sure your branding and how you're representing yourself out in the public, whether it's LinkedIn or social media, is representing you well. And because that's how people will be attracted to you, your profile, and consider you for future opportunities.
And that is so very true. And I think it's so difficult at the same time. I think that I feel like I have that difficulty. Now my rule as far as social media is, if I think it's hilarious, absolutely don't post it.
That's a rule. I think if it's funny, hey, why not?
Listen. I don't know. Now, and what's weird is, so I live in kind of a really conservative area, but I know people all over the place. I like to travel and whatnot. And one of the first things people say to me is, "Oh my God, your Facebook page is hilarious." Which I think I'm pretty funny. And but there are other people who are like, ma'am, you do this kind of work and that kind of work and are involved in these organizations. You can't say stuff like that on your Facebook page. And I'm not even talking about like profanity, nothing like that. Just like need to be real conservative. So I think it's super tough, right? To brand yourself and be authentic. Like authenticity, I think, is important too. How do you feel about that?
I do feel being authentic is important, and I do feel that the more you care about what others think, the less authentic you become.
Yes.
And here's why I'm going to challenge a little bit of that conservative thought, because I used to be very conservative. I never mixed my at-home Tiana with her friends, family, and community with Tiana, the business professional.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that those had to be separate. It is so interesting that when I started to bring in community Tiana, home Tiana into the professional environment, I was shocked at how much more support and I don't want to say recognition, but I will say more comments, positive things that came into my feed that I was surprised about. And here's when I realized I'm a woman of faith. And I'll just leave it at that. I know this is not a show about that.
Oh, no, ma'am. I'm a woman of faith, too. And I say it in public all the time on these airwaves.
All right. Okay. So I would never post anything about my faith in social media, LinkedIn, whatever. I always kept that separate. And I remember the first time I posted something. I don't remember what it was exactly. It might have been an amen or like something, with God in it. And I was like, uh-oh. Like as soon as I hit the send button, I was like, well, can you take that back? And immediately, it was clients that I had worked with, and they were like, oh, my gosh, I feel the same way. They were like, amen, and it was these comments that were flooding in. I was like, wait a minute. I was like, I didn't know they were a believer. And I'm thinking to myself, I just assumed people didn't want to hear what I had to say. No one ever said that. And I think that's a false understanding that we put on ourselves. Are there things that we should question at times? Perhaps, yes. But to be authentic is being truly you at home, in your community, with your friends, and in social media. But I do think that we don't want to do that in a way that is disrespectful, that is bashing someone else, their culture, who they are. I do think that that requires a little disclaimer, right?
Right, because you want to be tactful, right?
Yes.
And
yes.
do it without, you can express your faith without attacking others.
Absolutely. And so I do think that for those that are rebranding in a place where they're like, okay, I want to reposition myself and who I show up and how I show up for others. And I didn't do it alone. I had someone kind of give me some feedback on my LinkedIn profile, because that's my main squeeze, my main page is LinkedIn. And I had, given some feedback, and I started looking at pages that I really liked. And I was like, oh, yeah, I like this. And I think this would be a really good fit for me. And that's the great place to go. Ask someone in your circle, in your sphere of influence, to give you some feedback. Say, hey, if I want to be known for this, or, you know me as, a banker, but now I'm going into the realm of being a business consultant. What would resonate with you? Does this speak business consultant profile? And, they might say, no, it kind of looks a little like this or, that, and it doesn't really speak to me. Get some feedback. Get some people in your corner that are going to tell you what you need to hear and not what you want to hear. and get others to invite them to give you some feedback. And then once I did that, it really helped to reposition myself. So people see me now as Tiana Sanchez, again, CEO. She's business consultant. She's an executive coach. But it took some time, Melanie, to get there. I had to rebrand and reposition as I entered this new season of my career, coming off of that layoff and starting a new business.
And new seasons happen all the time.
Yes.
I think that there are people, especially people of a certain age, myself.
We don't know what that certain age is now, do we?
What middle age? Everyone else is getting older, not me. Leave that getting older stuff to yourself. No, but I think that...
my son said, I was like, man, I'm 47. I said, is that late 40s or mid 40s? He said, Mom, that's late 40s. I said, no, it's not. It's mid 40s. So I was really determined on that, but I digress. Keep going.
Have your kids told you that you were around during the 1900s? That's a bad one.
Oh, no, I haven't heard that one, so I guess I should be thankful.
The late 1900s? I always think that's
hilarious. My goodness. Oh, no. Let's not, Melanie.
I always think it's hysterical when I hear kids say that. I'm like, hey, hush. But I think that people, get in this age range and think like, oh, it's too late. You can't rebrand. You can't remarket. But you really can anytime, no matter what age you are. You can do that.
People
go ahead.
People are working later in their careers right now, so now's a great time to do that. People aren't retiring at 55, and they certainly aren't even retiring at 65, let's be honest, because we see it in workplaces where you have up to 5 generations working in one business. So people are not leaving, and if they're not leaving and they're continuing to work, they may be looking for other opportunities at different places, and so why not rebrand, refresh, give yourself a boost. I mean, who's done it well? I mean, I think of the entertainment industry, and we always used to joke about how Madonna used to always rebrand herself. You think of artists out there, Prince, who's no longer here, but he was really great at evolving and rebranding himself. And we clearly know they were beyond their 50s. So
facts. I didn't even think about
that.
Nothing
wrong with rebranding. Yes.
True.
That's their career. They're artists in a different way. You're an artist in whatever field you are. Why not give yourself a boost, a refresh, a little career facelift? How about that? So, and it's good to do that.
It is very good to do that. Now, one of the things I loved about your background is that you manage your transition in your career and your stresses, your money stresses, by exercising. Now, I'm just learning this here recently, that it actually works. And I have a bestie who's an exercise freak and has been telling me this for years. Like, you need to exercise. It's going to help your stress. It's going to help you not be anxious. I was like, whatever. I started exercising like a month ago, and I hate to say it, but she's right. But your exercise of choice is kickboxing.
Yes, ma'am.
How did that help you?
Kickboxing it's a little bit of kickboxing and a little bit of maybe karate or kung fu. My sensei was a black belt, and so he would often weave that into our sessions. And how I got into it, I'm trying to remember. I just know I am not the girl that likes to go to the gym and get on the elliptical machine. That is not my story. That is not my gift. I would much rather take a class. And so I loved going to classes. One of my favorite classes, Melanie, was spinning. So everybody loves the Peloton, which is great. Spinning. So you go to spin class, cycling class. I did that just actively for years. And then for some reason, the older I got, I don't know if I changed my diet, I started getting these incredible headaches. And every time I would spin, I would go home and I would get these headaches. And it just took me away from that thing that I loved. And I said, I need to find something else, another class. And I remember looking in my community, you get the little community, classes and things like that. And I'm like, oh, kickboxing, that looks like fun. And I tried it out. And I ended up doing it for 7 years. I did it through my second son's pregnancy. I was kickboxing up until 7 months.
You were pregnant and kicking stuff?
Yes, ma'am. And I remember being in class, and there were other people, and they were like staring at me like, because I was, doing my thing. And they were like, oh, my gosh, I should be ashamed of myself for not being as active. And I'm like, hey, this is just what I love. And so I did it with safety. My sensei was always watching me in the class. But I loved it, and it just created, like, to your point, it was very good during a time of a significant transition and change. I would go in there, it would be, energy rising, that blood pumping, and you just feel good. And plus the metaphor. I mean, think of kickboxing and fighting and knocking out and overcoming defeat. And when you get laid off, and your listeners can appreciate this, you feel a little defeated. You feel a little depleted and maybe deflated, right? All of those. Mm-hmm. And when you feel like that, you got to search real deep to get to a place to not let it sink you, to not let it bring you down. And a big part of that was me digging my heels into kickboxing. And when I put on those gloves, it was just like I morphed into someone else. And I was just, when I was hitting that bag, I was, fighting against myself, fighting against the doubt, fighting against the mentality that said, oh, you're out of a job, you don't have this, so you're less than. And it just really helped me get through that difficult place. And I continued it, after that phase as well. And I still love doing kickboxing. And it was truly a safety net for me during that time that was very difficult. But kickboxing may not be your audience's thing, but something, whether it's stretching, whether it's a walk outside 3 miles, whether it's Peloton or spinning, or you do something, very small.
Some kind of exercise. Now, I love that point. And when we come back on the other side of the break, we're going to talk about journaling. Sounds kind of woo-woo. People talk about it all the time. But we're going to talk about the importance of journaling during your transition. You're listening to Money Talk with Melanie. We're on with my guest, Tiana Sanchez, and we'll be right back in a few minutes.
Money Talk with Melanie, brought to you by MrCreditRepair.biz.
Money Talk with Melanie features entrepreneurs, CEOs, and politicos who are experts in their fields. Money Talk with Melanie. Money Talk with Melanie on 98.7 The Coast.
Money Talk with Melanie, brought to you by MrCreditRepair.biz.
Money Talk with Melanie features lively discussions of a wide range of global, domestic, and kitchen table financial topics. Money Talk with Melanie on 98.7 The Coast.
Welcome back to Money Talk with Melanie. This hour, we're speaking with Tiana Sanchez, who is talking to us about how to successfully transition into an entrepreneur from an unfortunate layoff. And you know what? Tell us the name of your company once again and exactly what it is that you do and the titles of both your books. I think it's very important before we move on.
Yes, so it's super easy to remember. It's Tiana Sanchez International, and I just abbreviated TSI for short. But what I do is I help organizations in their company to provide training and development. We provide coaching and assessments all around organizational effectiveness. So we want to help leaders become better. We want to make sure that they can serve their clients. And in order to do that, we help them on the internal side of things. The 2 books that were published, the first one is called Undefeatable, Conquering Self-Defeat. That was, I think, published in maybe 2012-13. And then the second one is F'd Up, the one you like, The Upside of Failure.
Yes, I love it. Very good. And can you get those on Amazon?
Yes.
Very good. Okay. Yes. Very good. Excellent. I didn't mention that before, and I was like, oh, let me make sure my girl plugs her book. Okay.
Yes, for sure.
So I was reading your background, and you talked about journaling and the importance of journaling during your transition. And, I thought about this. I was on with another guest not too long ago, and they were talking about the importance of journaling as well. Now, I'm a big to-do list app user. Like, I swear by my to-do list app user. And as I was talking to her, I said, the reason why I do that is because I get it out of my head, and then I'm not stressed out about having to remember it, and I'm not stressed out about those items being on my mind. And that is when I had the aha moment about journaling. I was like, oh, that's what the journaling is about. That's what that is.
It absolutely is that. And let's dispel the myth that journaling has to look the same for everybody. It doesn't mean you have to wake up at 6 a.m. in the morning, get your pen out and a journal and sit with a little quiet music and a coffee. You know, the pictures that we see on social media, and you journal for an hour. It doesn't have to look like that. Maybe that's not your story. Maybe it's mid-afternoon, you got your phone, and you're using voice command to type up a few thoughts that you had in your head because you want to get them out. It could be that. And that was more me. I'm more like you in the sense of my best ideas and things that when I have deep reflection come in the morning, and they come at night. So when I wake up in the morning and when I go to bed. And to the point that I always had to keep a pen and a notepad by my bed, because if you ever think, oh, I'm going to remember this when I wake up, you never do.
No, you're not.
At least for me, I never do. And I've learned many times. I've had probably great ideas that are lost forever because I never wrote them down. So I would keep a pen and paper by my bedside. And so as I'm going to sleep or waking in the morning, I'm thinking, I'm reflecting, and then I'm like, ooh, I love this thought, or ooh, I have an idea, like where the ideas of the books came from, where the ideas of future talks that I did for audiences came from. And they would come at these moments, and I would get a pen and paper out, and I would just jot them down. And then it became, I would be in a car driving, and I'm like, oh, well, I can't jot anything down. Then I started to use voice command. And so I have a lot of voice notes now that I use as part of my journaling. That's still journaling. It's just a different way of doing it. So don't get caught up, if you're an audience listening, that it has to look the same like everyone else. It's really getting thoughts out of your head onto paper, getting thoughts out of your head onto another platform of some sort. And so for me, that, again, helped to shape the 2 books that eventually were written and published, and it helped to shape future talks and keynotes that I did and delivered for companies and things like that, and different methodologies. You know, I would build out frameworks, and I'm like, oh, this is a great way. You know, one of my first programs I did, Melanie, early on was called GPS, and it was like this growth compass or something, and GPS stood for something. I don't even remember now, but G was like growth, and P was like performance or something, and S was something. It was like this compass of how we're going to take your company from here, point A to point B, you know. And that was an idea that was birthed from me reflecting and journaling. And then I would always come up with these different, again, methodologies and frameworks that helped me. And it really can be not only therapeutic, but it can be a great way to keep you fresh, like your mind sharp, your mind fresh, you know, getting those ideas out of your head and seeing what you got, figuring out what you're working with. You know, it's a great way to test things when you write them out.
It really is, and it gets it. I don't think people understand or realize how much is in your brain at any given time and how stressful that can be to carry that.
That's a good point.
It just is. So I guess I do kind of mini journal because I do have on my to-do list, there's an area of my to-do list called Someday where I don't put a due date on it. It's just something that I'm thinking about or a question that I have about something. It could be something from public policy to a question about life. Like it could be some new way to enhance my social media for my radio show. It could be a number of things. And I just put it on my list as like under Someday. And occasionally I'll run through it and be like, oh, you know what? I think I can do that right now. I feel like doing it right now. So I'll do it.
No, that's great. You know, sometimes it takes the form of a vision board. You know, people will use that. It's not quite as repetitive as journaling, but it's still, you know, something. It might be a goal that you use. And there's so many fantastic, you know, journal books out there. A friend of mine actually is a client, and she bought me for Christmas this journaling book. And it was faith-based, and it was like scripture a day. And it got me to going back to the pen and paper that I once started with. And I'm like, okay, I like this. Let me do that again. And so, again, don't let it define how you have to journal. You can mix it up. You can have a hybrid, you know, approach. But I do think there is something in the consistency of it. I do feel that there is power in doing something, creating a habit around it. And whether it's, you know, again, in the morning and in the evening, whatever your thing is. Some people will even write down, they'll have a gratitude journal. Now, one thing, Melanie, I do have, and I'm looking at it right now, is a gratitude jar. And I got this idea years ago from someone. I don't even remember. I would love to give them credit for it. But I started it in 2016 because I wrote 2016 on the outside of it. And so every time I got a card from someone, a thank you card, a thank you note, anything that, and even Post-it, I would write on there early when I started the gratitude jar what I was thankful for. And I would accumulate these cards over the years. And here's how it helped me for your audience, because when you are going through transition or difficult time in general, you will have moments of doubt. You will start to question, did I make the right decision leaving? Did I make the right decision starting my own business? And you have those moments. Am I making an impact? Are people really listening to my podcast? Am I making a difference? Because sometimes you don't get, when we talk about getting your flowers while you're still alive, you don't always get the feedback. You don't always get the comments, the letters, the emails. But here's what I've learned. People are listening. People are taking to heart what you say. Even if you touch one person, that's someone. It's just not, you may not always get to hear them and see them or meet them, but they're there. And so I said, you know what? I'm going to start capturing these things. And so I would create this jar. I started saving all of these cards. And these are all cards of thank you. So it's not just like birthday cards, although you could put that in there. But I put thank you cards. Anyone who ever said or thought I made a difference in their life in some form or fashion, I would put it in there. And every New Year's Eve, I take my gratitude jar, I dump them out, or I pick a handful and I just randomly, and I open them up and I read them aloud. And I've been doing this since 2016. And when I tell you, my heart is just so full at the end of me going through those cards. And it's like, wow, ooh, I remember that. And yeah, oh, yes, I remember this group. And, oh, it's kind of going down memory lane. But then it's the words that they've written about you. It just reminds you how grateful that you are, like you're grateful that you have been given an opportunity to impact someone's life, or you're reminded that you are making a difference. And so it's really been helpful. And every time I post it, I'll post a little something, people are like, oh, I'm going to do that. So for me, it's a gratitude jar. Sometimes it could be a gratitude journal.
It's on my to-do list now. Which happens a lot on my show when a guest comes up with something really good, and I'm like, yep, I'm doing that. I put it on my to-do list.
All right, I'm going to check in with you, make sure you got it next time.
Check in, how's your gratitude jar doing? I want you to read me 3 things from your gratitude jar.
There you go.
So I need to ask about the upside of failure. And I like how it starts up effed up, because when you fail, right, the first thing you think is, I effed up.
Yes.
And then you're like, okay, wait, what's the upside of this? How can you solve problems using it? How can you improve your life when you F up? Right.
And it can be both of the F's. And I say that it wasn't intentional to be the one that we probably associated with, but it really was the failing up is the actual word. It's
of course.
Up is failing upwards. Okay, so let's clarify
that. Yes, ma'am.
So, and the concept was birthed really part of the first book, Undefeatable, Conquering Self-Defeat, and it journals the story of when I lost my job and what I was going through at the time, and pretty much what we talked about in the first part of this conversation. If you missed it, you can go back and watch the replay. But that was what I talked about. And so this was like a follow-up. Like, we talked about being defeated, and it's like, okay, well, there's a stage before defeat, and it's the failure. And we don't talk enough about that taboo word, because since we grow up as toddlers, we're always taught to win. We're always taught that failing is bad. You don't reward the losers, it's the winners. And I really wanted to challenge that concept, because I went through these phases of failing many times over and feeling like a loser, not winning and things like this. And I said, okay, I really want to dive into this. And at the time I had my oldest son was 17, and he was a senior in high school. And I remember talking to him and maybe overhearing some of his friends and the things that they were aspiring to do. And, and they're like looking at all these athletes and movie stars and celebrities and like, man, they have all these things. And I think they were just kind of expecting that level of success, like, man, I'm going to get this and I'm going to get that. And I'm like, well, you do know that, there's a lot of work that comes with that. And, you might have some rejections and some failures and some mistakes. And I just didn't see that they were making a correlation to to get to certain levels, you're going to have some bumps in the road. There's some challenges that you're going to overcome. I just saw, hey, I want this, I'm going to get that, and there I'm going to be, and there wasn't this kind of in-between stage. And I said, I need to write about this. So I decided actually to partner with my 17-year-old son, and we developed this concept of the book. And so while I wrote 90% of it, the last chapter, actually, Melanie, in the book was written by my then 17-year-old son, who was a student athlete at his high school.
I love it.
So it was really cool to be able to partner with him to do that. And the concept really is there are people, two types of people. One type of person that sees failures as an aversion, something that I just don't have it. I was never born with it, so I can't do it. They see it as something innate in them, and there's no way to get around it. Where there's other people that see it as a growth opportunity, that if I work hard, if I gain the skills, I acquire what I need, I can get there. And it's actually Carol Dweck has really honed in on this growth mindset, fixed mindset, which, Melanie, I'm sure you've heard of.
Indeed.
And she talks in depth about that. So I actually quote her in the book, her philosophy or her, kind of thoughts around that growth mindset, fixed mindset, and where failure fits in and how it's our relationship with that word. And I look at it as an experience. When we experience something, it is a moment in time. It is something that often is not permanent. And so when I even change the way I say things, I don't say I have failed. I say I'm experiencing a failure. And you will anyone around my circle, my sphere, they will know. You will not hear me say I have in that sense when it's something that follows negative.
Now,
even if I have I have a headache, I don't say that. I'm experiencing a headache.
I usually say things like, it was less than perfect.
There you go. That's a great way. Yes.
It was less than the desired outcome.
Exactly. And that is exactly what it means. To fail is a desired outcome not achieved.
Well, yeah.
That's what it is.
But yeah, you can't mess with your own mind like that by saying, oh, I failed. You got to go in and say, okay, what do I need to tweak? What do I need to fix? Yeah. That's, I constantly competing with yourself. And even if, I don't know if you're this way, but even if I feel like I did a good job, I'm still looking at it like, but what about that? Like, you could have fixed that. That you could do better with that.
That's reflection.
I did a video one time and it was fine, like a commercial, but I noticed the entire time my head was tilted, like weirdly tilted. And I was like, what? And nobody said anything about it, but I saw it. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to have to, I need to focus. But yeah.
We are kinfolk because I am listening and I'm like, wow, that sounds just like me, because that actually happened to me too. But there's nothing wrong with reflection. Reflection should happen. You should be asking, okay, how did that go? How did I do? What could I do differently? Could I have done better? The problem is if you don't move past that stage of reflection into execution or into, hey, I'm gonna move forward in this, and you stay, and then you start to wallow in the mistakes or the things that you didn't do, and so you get to a place of why me instead of what's next.
And there you go.
We don't want to stay in the why me. We want to get to the what's next. And that is what I want to help people with in that processing of an experienced failure is, you should ask some questions. Okay, what could I have done differently? What about this outcome I didn't achieve because of what? You should ask yourself some questions, and then you should move forward from it. But if we don't have a good relationship with that word, we don't like saying it, we don't like to associate it with ourselves, we're afraid of it, we're embarrassed by it, then we're never going to get to that place where we're comfortable with the relationship. And I don't mean comfortable meaning where you're experiencing failures all the time. You should be learning from some of them, right? But you are going to experience some. And that is how you learn. And that is how you get better, and that is how you grow.
That is exactly right. Yes. You have to mess up. If you don't mess up, you can't grow. Got to mess up.
Yes.
It is a part of the process. Well, we are nearing the close of the hour. We got 2 minutes? Oh, well, I'm going to take them.
Hey.
My producer just said I had 2 minutes. I thought I didn't have any more time left. So give us your best tip for entrepreneurial success when you're transitioning from a layoff? What's your number one tip?
Know when to suit up, show up, and shut up. And I say that with love. Okay. I say this from a millionaire who gave me this advice at the early part of my career. I asked him, what is the one thing that helped you? And he ran multiple real estate. He had lots of real estate. He was a VIP client of mine in banking. And I asked him that, and that's what he told me. He said, know when to suit up, know when to show up, and know when to shut up. And it's about presenting yourself, how to present yourself, being respectful, being on time. Time is important. Time is your word. Time is your bond. And knowing when to listen, to be the student, to learn, because you don't always have to be the person talking. So know when it's time for you to sit, be the student, learn, and absorb, and then you can go out. So that would be the one thing I would say.
Ma'am, you gave me like 3 things. You gave the audience like 3 things. You sure enough did, and you're preaching the word. I'm going to play that over and over, especially the shut up part. Like when you talk for a living, it's hard.
Hey, I'm with you. I told you, you're my kinfolk because I do the same thing.
Yeah, in my other life, I'm a community engagement director. I do TV. I do this radio show. I talk all the time. But sometimes I need to shh.
That's going to be your cue for yourself.
Exactly. Well, Tiana Sanchez, I cannot thank you enough for being on Money Talk with Melanie this evening. Where can we follow you on social media if we want to?
Yeah, so you can find me on LinkedIn at Tiana Sanchez. You just type that in the box. LinkedIn, on Instagram, Like a Real Boss Lady is my handle for that. And the podcast is also Like a Real Boss. But TianaSanchez.com, if you go there, you can find all of my resources, learn a lot about me. Thank you so much, Melanie, for having me as a guest on your show.
Excellent. Thank you. Have a great night.
Thank you, too.
Money Talk with Melanie, brought to you by MrCreditRepair.biz.
Money Talk with Melanie on 98.7 The Coast.
Unemployed or underemployed? Have no fear, the TaxMama is here. Fuel your best career move with TaxMama. TaxMama can help you become an IRS enrolled agent with our next live 6-month course beginning in May 2023. Or you can start now with on-demand courses. It's your career on your schedule. Job opportunities are plentiful. TaxMama offers unlimited access to her tax mentoring portal with all the testing materials you need to overcome any test anxiety. Get your 3-year tax education in 6 months and become an IRS enrolled agent through the TaxMama. Visit irsexams.school. That's irsexams.school now to get your best career started today. The opinions expressed on the following program are strictly those of the guests and do not necessarily reflect the views of WCZT, regional media, coastal broadcasting, personnel, or advertisers. Money Talk with Melanie, brought to you by MrCreditRepair.biz.
This is important because it's your money. Your money. Money Talk with Melanie. Money Talk with Melanie on 98.7 The Coast.
Welcome back to Money Talk with Melanie. If you missed the first hour, shame on you, because you missed Ms. Tiana Sanchez, who talked to us about how we can turn a failure, such as a layoff or something like that, into an entrepreneurial opportunity. And we really talked about just different ways to manage a transition when you've been laid off from a job, like what you can do, like exercise and journaling and things like that. And she's lived it. So if you missed the opportunity to listen to her the last hour, make sure you catch up with Money Talk with Melanie anywhere that you enjoy your podcasts so that you can listen to what Tiana Sanchez has to say. She has a podcast called Like a Real Boss Podcast. And if you listen to her, you will find that she is indeed a real boss. So make sure you go back and listen to her. I'm sure I'll be posting the podcast in a few days at all my social media, at Money Talk Mel on Twitter, or at Money Talk with Melanie on Facebook, or even on Insta at Melanie T. Collette on Instagram. Our guest the second hour is her name is Nina Szewczak, and she's going to answer if your life's calling you and what would it have in store. And we're really talking about here, like if you're in midlife, should you just pack it in? You're middle age, life is over, don't try anything new, don't do anything new, or are there opportunities with being middle-aged, as it were? And I don't know. I think middle age is like 75 now. And I, of course, say that as a 52-year-old. But I digress. I'm still young. That is my position, and I'm sticking to it. But before we get to our second hour guest, let's talk a little bit about money, a little bit about personal finance. It's tax time, right? And we're thinking about filing taxes. So there are some new and legal, this is very important, ways to avoid a tax penalty if you should have to withdraw money early from a retirement account. You know, in this day and age, with inflation being high and our wages not keeping up with inflation, many people, unfortunately, have had to access credit or dip into their savings or retirement funds just to make ends meet. So usually what happens if you are saving for retirement and you have to withdraw money before age 59 and a half, you end up paying a 10% tax penalty. And that is obviously not a good thing. You pay a 10% tax penalty on that withdrawal. But there is an exception to the rule. There's a new legislation that's known as Secure 2.0, and it's supposed to add a few exceptions to both your 401k as well as your Roth IRA. So, and that if you hold either one of those types of accounts. Now, of course, the guidelines for this are things like domestic abuse. So if you find yourself in a DV situation, a domestic violence situation, and you have to suddenly move, this happens to a lot of people, you know, and part of that abuse sometimes is, you know, restricting access from the checking account. So you might find yourself in a situation where you have to dip into your retirement. If God forbid you have a terminal illness, or you meet with a severe financial emergency or a natural disaster, the Secure 2.0 program will allow you to do that. It's set to be signed into law very shortly by President Biden, and it's a part of course, you know, they're doing a lot of spending. It's a part of that spending package. So be very careful about that, about withdrawing funds early. It's a it's a terrible penalty unless these things apply. Like I said, terminal illness, domestic abuse from a domestic partner. Now, there are limitations. So, for example, if it's for domestic abuse, you can only take out up to $10,000. And by the way, this law doesn't take effect until 2024. If you have a financial emergency, and they are very specific about the expenses, the things that you can pay for. These are things that would be considered unforeseeable or immediate costs that are related to personal or family emergencies. You can withdraw up to $1,000 for that. And you also can't make any additional withdrawals for 3 years unless you repay the initial amount that you took out or make regular deposits that match that withdrawn amount. Of course, there's natural disasters as well. And for that, you can withdraw up to $22,000 without penalty. And that's if the disaster is a federally declared disaster. And, you know, it's important to know, just kind of like side note, this is one of the reasons why I do my show, because it's important to understand how the government works and how the law works. So the fact that this law is doing a cutout and making the caveat that it has to be a federally declared disaster. So that means, let's just say you live on a barrier island, which is particular to the area that I'm broadcasting from. There's tons of islands around here. And you just have a flood and it damages your house. It may not be a federal disaster. It might just be, you guys had a flood. So, yet these designations are government designations, and you have to be very important about that. Another possible exemption is higher education expenses for you, your spouse, your kids, or your grandkids. And those eligible costs include tuition fees, books, supplies, equipment required for a student's enrollment, which is nice, and any expenses for any special needs services that might be involved in getting your education. So that, of course, is a good thing. First-time home buyers can withdraw up to $10,000 without penalty. I think that's pretty nice. For health insurance, if you're unemployed, if you've ever found yourself in between health insurance policies, you know how expensive that can be, even if you get COBRA. That still can be quite an expense. So you are allowed to make withdrawal without penalty based on that. And then finally, unreimbursed medical expenses may not be subject to penalty. The exception applies to unreimbursed medical expenses that exceed 7.5% of your annual adjusted gross income. I don't know how they come up with these numbers. I'm sure some statistician, money person somewhere came up with that number. So just to give you an example, if your annual gross income is $100,000, then you can use a withdrawal to cover unreimbursed expenses up to $7,500. That's how it works. So it's good for you to be aware of these kinds of laws that are taking place. And if you need to dip in, make sure you check out the law. The law, again, is referred to as Secure 2.0, and see if you possibly qualify. You're listening to Money Talk with Melanie. We'll be back with Nina Szewczak in a few minutes.
Money Talk with Melanie, brought to you by MrCreditRepair.biz.
Money Talk with Melanie on 98.7 The Coast.
Unemployed or underemployed? Have no fear, the TaxMama is here. Fuel your best career move with TaxMama. TaxMama can help you become an IRS enrolled agent with our next live 6-month course beginning in May 2023. Or you can start now with on-demand courses. It's your career on your schedule. Job opportunities are plentiful. TaxMama offers unlimited access to her tax mentoring portal with all the testing materials you need to overcome any test anxiety. Get your 3-year tax education in 6 months and become an IRS enrolled agent through the TaxMama. Visit irsexams.school. That's irsexams.school now to get your best career started today. Money Talk with Melanie, brought to you by MrCreditRepair.biz.
Money Talk with Melanie features lively discussions of a wide range of global, domestic, and kitchen table financial topics. Money Talk with Melanie on 98.7 The Coast.
Welcome back to Money Talk with Melanie. Our guest this hour is Nina Szewczak. She has the answers if your life is calling you in this midlife, middle age situation, if that's where you are. If your life calls, what would it have in store? So she's going to join us in a moment to tell us all about it. She's the author of the book called The Midlife Revolution, How to Start Over After Any Setback, Transform Any Situation from Tragic to Magic, and Make Life Great Again. Very excited to have her on the show. A little bit about Nina. Her experience and expertise combine over 17 years of work and study in the realm of transformation and change, leadership and management, coaching, mentoring, and HR, and revolutionizing lives. Nina completely transformed her own life twice and is helping people to overcome adversities, turn situations from tragic to magic, get better, not bitter, and make life great again. Without further ado, Nina Szewczak.
Hello.
Hi. Very nice to talk to you this
Melanie.
evening.
Thank you so much for having me. And can I just say, your pronunciation of my surname is amazing.
Ma'am. have to tell you a funny story about that. If you go back and listen to this as a podcast, you will hear me have mispronounced it several times. And during the break, I was like, I got to get this. So I said it. I have to be authentic. I have to tell the truth all the time. It's like a downfall. So during the break, I repeated it like 3 times. And I said to my producer, I was like, I have to get this right. And I was like, Szewczak. It's Szewczak. Because when I'm looking at the spelling, I'm like, it doesn't, my eyeballs are not seeing Szewczak. So, yeah, I have to admit, I may not have gotten it perfectly earlier in the show. But
you did it now.
But I got
it.
I nailed the intro, though, so that's good. Progress. Anything is progress. Is there anything that I didn't mention in your bio that you'd like the audience to know?
No, I think you did a fantastic job, and I'm just so excited to be on your show. Thank you so much for having me.
Do you mind me asking where you're from?
I'm originally from Poland, but I spent half of my life in Poland, and then I moved to the UK, so hence the random accent.
No, it's beautiful, but it's similar to a friend of mine, and I've never actually inquired where she was from, but it sounds almost exactly like hers. So that's why I was curious. I was
well, I hope
very
it's
curious.
A friend that you like.
It indeed it is. It is certainly a friend that I like. She's awesome. So I was like, oh, I'm curious. She said I had never heard it before, and this is only the second time that I've heard that accent before, so I had to ask. So you say apparently that midlife is a revolutionary time. That it's not time to pack it in, because I'm pretty sure I'm ready to pack it in. I don't know about you. No, I'm totally not. But but I think that some people definitely do feel that way, right?
They do. A lot of people do. And, a lot of people go through midlife crisis. I think, crisis in itself, the name, the word is so negative. And midlife crisis has got a reputation for, people buying a Porsche, going crazy, getting your haircut, getting involved in affairs, and, doing lots of crazy things to try to find something that maybe they feel is missing from their life. And it doesn't have to be like this. You can revolutionize your life, and you can create a fantastic life without having to spend a fortune on it, and you can create genuine happiness. So I'm very passionate about that.
I like it. I like that idea. And some people do really drastic things. You see women, I've observed this. I don't know how you feel about this, doing things to their face and their bodies and I'm like, man, why did you do, like it used to be, I don't know, maybe I'm dating myself, that when women got plastic surgery, the whole intent was that you weren't supposed to notice, right? Like it was supposed to be, but now I feel like people are doing it intentionally, like, look at what I did to my face.
And you're like, who are you? Excuse me.
And I'm like, why? But why? Why did you do that to your face? You're not, and I feel like younger and younger people are doing it too.
I agree, and it's definitely getting more and more drastic. And I think, maybe the world of social media is also not helping, because everyone is just seeing everyone's highlights reels and the perfect life, which obviously isn't real. No one is really showing their pain. No one is showing their challenges and difficulties. Everyone is just showing their best and filtering it, right? So then when you keep looking at this everywhere, you just feel like you look in the mirror and you think, wow, I need to do something about this. So perhaps that also has an influence of driving people to change their appearance.
But why don't people, I wonder what this is, why don't people look at it from an intellectual perspective? Like when I'm on social media, I am on there with the mindset that this is not real life. Like you do understand it. And there's people who feel like they know me. I know all about your life. I know. I'm like, you know what I put on social media. That's what you know.
Yeah.
So, and I just wonder, why people don't take a step back and say, okay, that's not real life.
I agree. But I think where maybe there's so much of this, and where people are very often, maybe, I don't want to say not in charge of their minds, but sometimes they're not in charge of their brains and allow the brain to run you on an autopilot. If you feed your brain with that sort of thing every day, and you allow the brain to compare to the outside world the whole time, you are going to start feeling rubbish. And if you don't control that, then very easy that can go downward spiral. And then when we get to, around midlife, it's like, well, what else is out there? I'm not my youngest anymore. I've had some sort of career. So I'm probably not going to start another one. And people feel, and I see so many people who are like, I'm 40, 50, is there even any point in doing anything else? I'm like, what? Of course.
Yeah. Exactly. Like, what are we even talking about? And in the opening of your book, I loved how you kind of like set the table. You say you have 3 bullet points, and you say we're the most comfortable generation there has ever been in the history of the world. Amen. I mean, there's TikToks upon TikToks and memes upon memes about Gen X, right? And about how comfortable, how comfortable we are.
Absolutely.
We have more possibilities and opportunities than there have ever been on this planet. Absolutely true. And we have quicker and easier access to more resources than ever before, with the world literally at our fingertips, which, I find mind-blowing. I agree with that 150%. I'm like, there's no excuse. You have a computer in your hand all day long. And despite all of these positives, you say we're more unhappy, more stressed, more worried, more depressed than ever before. And how in the world does that happen?
I know. I personally find it crazy. But I do meet a lot of people. I spoke to a lady not that long ago who basically said to me, and I think I actually mentioned it in the book, who said to me, well, me and my husband had a great job. We had kids and we worked not too far from each other. So on the way from work, the husband used to pick her up. And she was like, every day we would spend some time on the motorway, driving home, having dinner. And at some point, she was like, is this it? Like, is this my life? The motorway, work, the kids, and home. And she literally lost her will to live. She was like, I don't want to be here if this is it. And I'm like, well, of course this doesn't have to be. You can create whatever you want. You are in charge of the experience. And I, personally, I feel very passionate about it because, like I said, I feel that we're the most comfortable and, generation ever, and we have so many more possibilities. And we also live in very privileged countries.
Yes.
Like, we have so much privilege and so much freedom and so much independence that, not that long ago, people had to fight for it. People had to lose their lives for what we now take for granted and don't use. So I feel like it's almost disrespectful if I don't make the most of my life and every single day. I feel that's disrespectful to all the people who are fighting so hard for us to have those freedoms, to have those opportunities, to have the technology, right? But not everyone is like that. And this is it, when our brains are basically like a computer. Whatever you feed it with, it will think and it will create the life that you have trained your brain to think about. So if you feed it with negativity, if you feed it with constant, anxious thoughts, worrying about the future or living in the past and what has happened 5, 10, 15 years ago, then unfortunately you're not really creating a great future for yourself because you're either stuck in the past or you're worried about the future, which obviously may or may not happen.
Exactly. It's so important to be present. Right? To just be present and say, okay, look around and look at what you're doing and what's going on. But, if you are not, what's the word? The word's in my head. Proactive is not the right word. It's a word related to proactive. Deliberate. That's the word I'm looking for. If you're not living in a deliberate way, then I guess you are going to one day look up and say, oh, wow, this is it. This is what I'm doing. I'm just moving through life. That's it. You know what I mean? You're just
Absolutely, yes.
But yes, I have a long list of stuff that I need to do. And I'm 52 and I feel like I'm running out of time because I got stuff to do.
There is so much, because the thing is, the planet that we live on, I feel is so incredible, and I'm so in awe of what Mother Nature has provided us with, and also what humans have added to it. I mean, we also messed it up, let's be clear about it, but we have also created amazing stuff, so there is so much to explore, so much to do, and you can be whoever you want to be, you can do whatever you want to do, you can have whoever you want to have, right? You are in charge. But I also feel that sometimes that kind of, where there's a blame, there is a claim culture, and, the government isn't doing this, and the community isn't doing this. Well, no one is going to do it for you. Like you have, like you said, you have to be deliberate, you have to be intentional, and you have to take the reins and create the life that you want. Like, the opportunities are there. And, we have got the most sophisticated and intelligent piece of kit on this planet that we came here equipped with that is free, your mind and your body. It can literally create anything for you, right?
Yes.
So why not make the most of it?
But I think, people don't realize that you have control, like you said, take the reins over your mind. Like, you can control what you feed it. You can self-direct it to where you want it to go. But I think, I don't know, it takes a long time sometimes for adults to realize that. Like, they just start thinking about stuff and just start listening to what's in their head. And it's like, yo, don't do that. You and your mind need to have a meeting of the minds. Like, you need to make sure that you have it together and that you are directing your thoughts. Now, you say in your book that there's a difference between a midlife crisis and a midlife revolution. What's the difference?
Well, the difference is the intention and being deliberate. Rather than going through midlife crisis and searching for the answers for your happiness, for fulfillment, for meaning outside of you, you look within because you have all the answers. And I know it might sound airy-fairy, but you genuinely have all the answers within you. So searching for happiness outside of you, with the new car, with the new holiday, with the new house, new face, new body, whatever that might be, that is never going to bring that happiness and fulfillment that you are after. That's going to bring you temporary happiness. But once the initial enthusiasm wears off, you're going to be on a hunt for the next thing. So the midlife revolution is actually taking the reins of your mind. It is realizing that you're in charge. It is defining for yourself, what does happiness mean to you? Not what it means by societal standards or what it means to your parents or what it means to your partner or what it means to your friends. But what does happiness mean to you? What's your definition of happiness? What's your definition of success? What's your definition of meaningful life? You decide on that, and that's what you create.
That is so true, and it is different for every person, and I think that's part of what you're saying.
100%, absolutely. Because also what I see very often is people will say, I really want the best for another person. I really want them to be happy, but they want the person to be happy judged by their definition of happiness, not by the person's definition of happiness, but I'll be happy if they will be, if they will do what I want them to do or what I think is right. And I'm like, no. If you want genuine happiness for someone, you want them to be happy on their terms. You want them to be happy based on whatever definition of happiness it is for them, not what the definition of happiness is for you, because we all have different definitions because we all look at life through different lenses, right?
Yes.
Like we all have a lens that's based on our experience, our values, our beliefs, and our own definitions. So through that lens, we never really see the reality how someone else sees it. It's impossible. All of our definitions are unique. So that's why it's really, really important to decide your own and not to go with what you think you should. I literally banned the word should. I even scanned the book and made sure that there isn't any shoulds in there.
You made them take out any time. Reword that sentence. No should, no shoulds.
No shoulds, because it's such a judgy word. And a lot of people that I work with, they'll say, I feel like I should be doing this because that's what the family expects, or I should be doing that because that's the societal standards. I'm like, okay, well, if you forget all the shoulds, what would you want to do? Because ultimately, at the end of our days, who's going to be the judge of how great your life was? None of the people that you think about, none of the standards that you think are there, and none of the expectations. It's only going to be you. So you need to decide what you want, and you need to go for it.
For sure. And there's so many people, on the other side of that, I was just thinking about that. I have a phrase that I say occasionally, which is, why can't you let that person live? And what I mean by that is, you have relatives that are very judgy about what you should be doing when, how you should do your wedding ceremony and what colors you should have. Even simple things like that. People get in legitimate arguments over dumb stuff because they just feel, they feel entitled to make those decisions for other people. And I am a strong believer in letting people live. Let that person live. You get to live, right? You're living your life. I say this to people way too often. You're living your life the way you want, correct? So
absolutely. And I even say to people, and when people say to me, it's none of my business, but I'm like, if you start a sentence,
Put a period after it.
It isn't my business, but I'm like, then you know that there is no need to finish the sentence. There's no need.
Amen.
There's no need for you to express it.
Get rid of that comma and put a period. Now you're there.
Yeah, exactly. That's it.
This is none of my business. Period.
Exactly.
Straight up, period, point blank. That is absolutely so true. So now you talk about step one. You said is gaining clarity, and I think we've talked about that. But step two, I think, in my opinion, is probably the most difficult part, which is taking the reins. And you have several kind of like mini steps to what's involved in taking the reins. And I think anytime we have to correct ourselves or make changes within ourselves, that's the tough part, because we're all absolutely perfect in our own eyes, right? never do anything wrong. We completely got it together, and so I think that's the hardest part. So when you talk about taking the reins, what are some steps involved in that?
Well, I think, you need to start with self-awareness. And what I mean by self-awareness is very often we think about self-awareness in terms of awareness of the self on others and in relation to others and the external world. So how do I come across? How do I behave? How do I present? And so on. But actually, the awareness of the self on the self is the starting point and the most key point. And what I mean by this is the awareness of your thoughts on yourself, because your thoughts generate your emotions, and your emotions generate your behaviors, and your behaviors drive your actions, and your actions create your experiences. And your experiences adapt to the experience that we call life.
Yep.
So everything starts with a thought. So if you're not in charge of your own thoughts, if you're unaware, and bearing in mind that a lot of them are in our subconscious mind, and they're basically just an autopilot thought that you have thought every day for a number of years. And, we think 60 to 70,000 thoughts every day. And over 90% of them every day are the same thoughts as we had yesterday and the day before yesterday. They're just an autopilot.
Oh,
And
I did not know that part. That last part,
Yeah.
Say that again? About the
So we
repeating
think about-
thoughts? Say it again?
Yeah. So we have about 60 to 70,000, an average person has about 60 to 70,000 thoughts per day. And about 90% of them are the same thoughts every day. The same thoughts that you're thinking today were there yesterday and the day before yesterday. And they just become an autopilot thought. And they mostly sit in your subconscious mind. So you don't even realize that you have them. So until you become aware of this and start changing, like, you're going to create the same experiences every day. And if you want to create something else, and if you want to create the life that you want, well, you can't continue, it's like the quote of insanity, doing the same things and expecting different results is insanity. So if you keep thinking the same things that leading to the same behaviors and actions, well, you're not going to create anything different, are you?
You certainly are not. Oh my good. Okay. Keep going. I'm listening. Now, I always attributed that to actions, right? I think that was Einstein that said that about doing the same thing repeatedly is the definition of insanity and expecting a different outcome. Definition of insanity. But you're right. It needs to go a step further, because it's the thoughts that lead to the actions.
Exactly. Everything starts with a thought. So if and I often see this, like, oh, take this action or do this, do that. And I'm like, oh, well and good, like, all helpful advice. But unless you sort out your mindscape, so the landscape of your mind, and you figure out what weeds you need to get rid of so you can make space for new seeds and plant new thoughts, the thoughts that you actually want to have, the intentional ones, you're always going to create the same things. And this is what then leads to, is this it? Is this it for the rest of my life? Like the motorway, the house, the kids, and the career. Is this it? I'm not happy, right? Well, if you keep thinking the same thoughts, then you're going to keep creating the same outcomes. So this is the first step, and it is really, really important one. So the awareness of the self on the self. Without that, there will always be, you'll always be repeating some part.
For sure. So I guess that's what you call in the book becoming conscious, like paying attention, right?
Absolutely, yeah. You have to pay attention to your thoughts, because if your thoughts drive your emotions, which they do, then very often people say, oh, I'm unhappy, or this person made me unhappy, or this person is pushing my buttons, or this is driving me crazy. I'm like, no, there isn't anything that is driving you crazy. You are driving yourself crazy.
Yes.
There's nothing, like, we generate our emotions by the thoughts that we're having. So whatever situation we're in, it's not the situation, but what you think about the situation that determines how you feel about it, right?
That is absolutely right.
Right? If you are stuck in traffic, so for example, I was driving to the airport and I was stuck in traffic, and I wasn't sure whether I'm going to make the flight or not. And in that moment, I have no idea what's going on, and I have a choice of either think stressful thoughts and like, oh my God, am I going to make the plane? Like, will the flight live without me? What am I going to do? Or am I going to think, well, I am where I am, and there is nothing I can do about it, and I'm just going to have to go with it and see what happens, and then figure out the next step when I get there and find out whether I actually got there on time or not. So I could have spent, I was actually stuck in traffic for 4 hours. I could have spent 4 hours being super stressed and frustrated, or spend, like I did, listening to music and thinking, see what happens. Well, that's a choice.
That's exactly right. And deciding to go the stressed out route clouds your thinking. And that's the very time when you need to think straight and think strategically and think what your next steps are going to be in case this doesn't work out. So if you get super stressed, you're going to mess up your train of thought, which is not good.
Absolutely.
And so we're up against the break. Hold on to that thought. Put a pin in it. We're up against the break. I'm actually over time, as usual. You're listening to Money Talk with Melanie. I'm talking to Nina Szewczak. We'll be back in a few moments.
Money Talk with Melanie, brought to you by MrCreditRepair.biz.
Money Talk with Melanie features entrepreneurs, CEOs, and politicos who are experts in their fields. Money Talk with Melanie. Money Talk with Melanie on 98.7 The Coast.
Unemployed or underemployed? Have no fear, the TaxMama is here. Fuel your best career move with TaxMama. TaxMama can help you become an IRS enrolled agent with our next live 6-month course beginning in May 2023. Or you can start now with on-demand courses. It's your career on your schedule. Job opportunities are plentiful. TaxMama offers unlimited access to her tax mentoring portal with all the testing materials you need to overcome any test anxiety. Get your 3-year tax education in 6 months and become an IRS enrolled agent through the TaxMama. Visit irsexams.school. That's irsexams.school now to get your best career started today. Money Talk with Melanie, brought to you by MrCreditRepair.biz.
Money Talk with Melanie features lively discussions of a wide range of global, domestic, and kitchen table financial topics. Money Talk with Melanie on 98.7 The Coast.
Welcome back to Money Talk with Melanie. We're speaking with Nina Szewczak, and she's talking to us about how to, instead of having a midlife crisis, let's build a midlife revolution. And before the break, we were talking about the importance of becoming conscious of what's going on in our lives. And now I'd like to pivot a little bit. Once we are conscious of our thoughts, conscious of our feelings, and how they relate to our actions, so important. And one more thing about that, I want to know how you feel about that before we move on. I strongly think that people don't recognize their feelings and emotions as being kind of isolated and separate from the required action. Like, you might be afraid to do something, and it's okay to like acknowledge that fear and then go ahead and do whatever it was you're afraid of anyway.
That is so true. And it is because I think a lot of people don't realize that, what's in your mind is not necessarily true or a fact. Like
exactly.
The brain will basically, the brain is like a computer. It will think whatever you put in there. So if you think a thought enough times, it becomes a belief. But a belief doesn't mean that it's true or that it's right or that it's a fact. So we pick these things up over the years, and then, those beliefs and thoughts become the autopilot thoughts that drive our life. And people are completely unaware of it.
Indeed. They think their thoughts are real. And that is not if I feel this way, then that must be accurate. Like, no, actually, your thoughts and your emotions are probably like the biggest trickster in your entire life. So,
Absolutely. And like your brain is lying to you. And also like our brains, they're wired for survival. And the brain is a record of the past. So the brain predicts our future based on the past, but like forecasting, right? In the business.
yes.
The brain looks at what it experienced in the past and then predicts the future based on that. So anything that it hasn't experienced, anything that is new, is seen as the unknown. And the unknown is scary because it hasn't experienced it yet. So then if you listen to your mind, that is a bit of a scaredy cat, you're not gonna take the action that you want to take. And of course, the brain is actually the reptilian brain, which is the like oldest and least evolved part. So the rest of the brain has evolved, but this hasn't evolved so much in us. So for the brain, having lots of emails and being overwhelmed with this, or having a deadline, or doing work presentation, is no different to having a predator next to you.
Yes.
So it will react in the same way. So if you listen to your brain, you basically get paralyzed or freeze and be like, oh, I'm not taking this action. And there is no need for that. Like, you can always choose courage over fear.
Indeed.
Of course, be sensible. But like you like, this is going back to taking the reins. Like, you are in charge. You are the pilot of the plane that you have been given. Like, you are the driver of this car. Like,
yes.
I
And
always
to be
feel like
clear, we're not talking about indulging your adventure gene and
No.
jumping out of planes and not that, if you want to do that, have fun. But we're not talking about high risk behavior. We're talking about normal things that you might be afraid to do because your brain is filling you with all these fears. And if you take a second to examine a lot of our thoughts, you can kind of trace back to why you feel that way or why you think that way. So you have to, and this is one thing I learned maybe within the last 10 years or so, is that those thoughts and feelings also have to do with things that your brain picked up when you weren't paying attention to your brain picking it up. In other words, subconsciously, like, something on TV, something that you heard somewhere else, because your brain is always working even when we're not paying attention to it working.
Exactly. And this is like, especially, so there are different brain waves that are linked to different states. And especially in the morning, so just after you wake up and before you go to bed, so the brain waves that we experience is gamma, beta, alpha, theta, and delta. So normally, most of the day, when we're alert and conscious, we operate within beta. Alpha is a more relaxed state. Maybe you're watching TV or reading a book. And then you go into theta, which is just before you fall asleep, which is a hypnotic and when you're more susceptible state. And then you go into delta and you fall asleep. So, and then you wake up, and it's the same, but obviously the other way. So you go from delta to theta to alpha to beta, being alert, and gamma is like super alert. So just before you fall asleep or when you wake up, like the brain is in that hypnotic state, which means it's more susceptible to suggestion. So if you're falling asleep to a TV and you're watching, whatever adverts or, scary things or whatever, that's going straight into your subconscious.
Yep.
So that's the reason I'm mentioning the brain waves, because the way to access subconscious mind is through the alpha and theta stage. So if, your mornings or evenings are spent, on things that are scary, that are making you feel anxious and whatever, that's being installed in your brain. And we do that every day. And the same, like in humans, our actual brainwaves don't develop. We are in the subconscious mind up until the age of 6. So up until the age of 6, your brain picks up everything because it goes straight into the subconscious, because our conscious mind doesn't develop until we are 6 onwards. And because the subconscious mind, it doesn't have the analytical and decision-making capability, it takes everything as a fact. So everything that it hears, it just takes as this is the truth. So this is why we have so much in our heads that may or may not be right, may or may not be true, may or may not be good belief. But unless you become aware of it and decide what you actually want to have in your mind, your subconscious mind will run you on the autopilot every day.
Yep.
And then actually your mind is your master instead of you being the master of your mind.
That is exactly right. And so you also talk about, two dirty words, consistency and accountability. Yuck. So who wants that? Either one of those I reject. both of those, consistency and accountability. So what role do consistency and accountability play in taking the reins and taking control?
Massive, and when people are like, oh, I just can't be consistent. I'm like, well, you consistently check your phone, you manage that. So you can consistently learn to check your brain and see what's going on in there. So consistency and accountability are massive, because without that, so obviously it takes years for certain behavioral patterns and patterns of thoughts to get developed. So then when you want to change it, it's not going to happen overnight. So if you just do it, for 1 day or 2 days, and you think, oh, I've changed. Well, no, because your mind will want to go back to the familiar. Will want to go back to what it knows. Will want to go back to the comfort zone. That's where, without consistency, you always revert back. And that's why things like New Year, New Me and New Year's resolutions don't work. Because after you think, oh, from the 1st of January, boom, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to, go and learn that, and this is what I'm going to achieve and whatever.
Well,
So
that's
after
why
the
you can
initial
only start
enthusiasm-
diets on Mondays. That's a thing.
Yeah,
like you can
right?
only, if you have like ice cream on Monday afternoon, then obviously, the whole diet is trash,
wait
and you have to
until
start
next
all over
Monday.
the next Monday. Eat up for the rest of the week. No, but that's our mindset and the silly things that we think.
Exactly, because the mind wants to keep you where? In the comfort zone, right? So it's not even that it's you, but the mind in that case decides for you. So whatever goal you decide to have, after the initial enthusiasm wears off, if you don't keep consistency and start changing your thoughts and keep check with what your mind is doing and being in charge of your mind rather than being its servant, you're just going to go back to square one. And that's why, like 8% of people, I think, achieve their New Year's resolutions. Because unless you change your thoughts in alignment to then align the behaviors and the actions, it's never going to be sustainable.
For sure. Now, another thing that you bring up, which is so important, and we touched on it a bit when we talked about, leaving the TV on while you're sleeping and stuff like that, is your environment and how important it is when you are observing these things, trying to make these changes, and really examining the relevance of life. How important is your environment, and what things are you talking about?
Well, environment is massive. The internal environment is obviously paramount, so your mind and your emotions, which we discussed. But the external environment is also very important, because if you surround yourself with triggers and things that are driving you to certain behaviors that you no longer want to have, then it's going to be harder for you to make changes. So it is important to think, who do I want to become? And what do I need to do in order to become this person? And then what do I need to remove from my environment? And what are the obvious triggers that will be the temptations to go back to the past, to the old self, to the comfort zone and so on. And sometimes, sometimes when it is environment, sometimes it is workplace, sometimes it is the people that you hang out with, sometimes it is the places that you go to. And you just have to decide, what's more important? Is your future and what you want from life more important, or is the comfort zone and what you have always done more important to you? And that's the decision.
That is very true. I think I either read a book or had a guest that talked about this one time, and I'm sure it's a meme as well, about hanging out with people who are where you want to be, instead of hanging out with people who have no aspirations or are, and I'm not saying always hang with somebody who can help you, like be a leech. That's not what I'm suggesting. But what I'm suggesting is you need to observe up close and personal the habits and thought processes, etc., of people who are successful or who want to achieve things that you're trying to achieve.
Absolutely, and that is key, because I think it's like we're the average of the 5 closest people that we hang out with most of the time. Which is always an interesting concept. But I think it's also very, very important to do that, because, like I said, the brain is a record of the past, so it predicts the future based on what it has already experienced and the known. So if you want to do something else that you haven't done, you need to make a conscious effort to show your brain new horizons. And you won't be able to do this if you just hang out in the same environment the whole time. You need to get out there and see what are the people that are doing something that you want to do, the people that, have got something that you want to have, the people who you aspire to, who inspire you, and so on. These are great ways to show the brain new horizons, to inspire the brain to want to learn and want to go out and do something different. And if you constantly sit in the same environment, well, you're not going to change anything. And also, when it comes to environment, like, of course, our minds and body get conditioned to how they feel in certain places, right? So you come to your living room and you always feel the same. You feel comfortable. You go to specific meeting rooms. So if you go to a meeting once a week, let's say, and the meetings are not always the most pleasant ones, the minute you walked into that room, doesn't matter if there is something else happening in there, your mind is already bringing the same thoughts and emotions as if in those meetings. Same like if you go to a dentist, right?
Yes.
You might, even just thinking about it, you already have the same feelings as you always do in the waiting room at the dentist, because the mind and the body get conditioned to feel a certain way in certain environments. So if you constantly sit in your natural habitat, that brings out certain feelings. Well, it's very difficult to make change in that, because the mind and body will always try to keep you there.
It is that is very true. And just doing different. If you've been doing the same thing all the time, and especially, I think examining the reasons why you do what you do. Because we a lot of times just don't peel back the onion, right? And say, well, why don't I want to do this? How come I'm not interested in doing this? Why do I say I'm not interested in doing that? You know what I mean? And sometimes just say yeah, just say yes. Someone asks you to do something different, just say yes. Just say yes. Yeah. Try it. Give it a shot. You might end up doing something that you absolutely love without knowing it.
Absolutely. And you need to widen your horizons, and life is just a brief sparkle, right? And the planet is incredible, and we have so many opportunities. Why wouldn't you want to try something different? That's what life is for. It's a constant evolution. It's development, it's growth, it's adventure.
Well, it should be. It should be, but some people don't feel that way. They think it's cool to be the same person they were when they were a teenager. And it's that's not cool. That's not okay. And that kind of transitions into one of the last thoughts that I wanted to hit on. You say, what an ugly phrase, to take full and absolute responsibility for yourself and your life. Well.
Sorry about that.
So what does that, I feel like that's an energy that's kind of frowned upon in this day and age. What do you mean by that?
Well, it's definitely frowned upon, because it's easier to think that it's the government's fault, or it's your mother's fault, or it's mother-in-law, or whatever, or whoever's fault. But the only control in life, we give ourselves the illusion that we have so much control. The only control in life we have is the control of ourselves. So the only control is self-control. And the only thing you can do is take 100% responsibility for yourself and your life. Of course, there will be things that will be outside of our control in terms of adversities or things that happen that you couldn't have predicted and so on. And we all face different challenges. But whatever happens, you are in control of how you're going to react to this, and whether you're going to move on with wisdom or with wounds, whether whatever happens to you is going to make you bitter or is going to make you better. So there's always, that's always your choice, and you need to take responsibility for it. So I really dislike when people mourn. When someone starts mourning at me, I'm like, right, are you prepared to do something about it? If not, don't mourn. It's a waste of time and waste of energy.
If not, hush on up. Hush up. So I love the book, the Midlife Revolution ebook. You should definitely, if you love what you heard this last hour, pop onto her website. Tell everybody what your website is.
It's just www.themidliferevolution.com.
Excellent information there. She's got courses and guides and articles, just really great information there. I thoroughly enjoyed researching you earlier today, and I think everybody should definitely check you out. I appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much, and thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. You have a great night.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Money Talk with Melanie, brought to you by MrCreditRepair.biz.
Money Talk with Melanie on 98.7 The Coast.
Unemployed or underemployed? Have no fear, the TaxMama is here. Fuel your best career move with TaxMama. TaxMama can help you become an IRS enrolled agent with our next live 6-month course beginning in May 2023. Or you can start now with on-demand courses. It's your career on your schedule. Job opportunities are plentiful. TaxMama offers unlimited access to her tax mentoring portal with all the testing materials you need to overcome any test anxiety. Get your 3-year tax education in 6 months and become an IRS enrolled agent through the TaxMama. Visit irsexams.school. That's irsexams.school now to get your best career started today. Money Talk with Melanie, brought to you by MrCreditRepair.biz.
This is important because it's your money. Your money. Money Talk with Melanie. Money Talk with Melanie on 98.7 The Coast.
Welcome back to Money Talk with Melanie. I hope you enjoyed the show. I'd like to thank my guests, Tiana Sanchez and Nina Szewczak. They both did such a wonderful job this evening. I want to thank Mark for working the boards this evening. Great job. Thank you so much. I also definitely want to thank the one and only Eva Rosenberg, aka the Tax Mama. Be sure to check out her website at irsexams.school. Remember to tune in to Money Talk with Melanie next week for an intriguing 2-part episode. We're going to talk to Dr. Gleb Tursky, who will join us to uncover the risks associated with crypto mogul Sam Bankman-Fried's audacious double or nothing approach to leadership. Then we'll speak with Beverly Williams, who will drop by as we ask whether the truth still holds value in a world of modern finance. Don't miss this riveting conversation. And remember, all of this is important because after all, it's your money.
Money Talk with Melanie features lively discussions of a wide range of global, domestic, and kitchen table financial topics. Guest interviews include entrepreneurs, CEOs, and politicos who are experts in their fields. Be sure to listen up. This is important because it's your money. Your money. Be sure to listen to Money Talk with Melanie. Money Talk with Melanie. Wednesdays, 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern Time on 98.7 The Coast.
Money Talk with Melanie, brought to you by MrCreditRepair.biz.